Good evening and welcome on Viewpoint on DBS Television. It is Friday, of course, the 5th of June 2020. We are kind of inside the house today, and I want to really tell you, I have to tell you, able journalist with us, Cynthia Ngemo, and of course, Mange Venashus, in whom you see very often. They will be talking certain aspects concerning school resumption and the fight of COVID-19, as well as press freedom in Cameroon. I would start with the lady before going to the gents. Good evening to you, Cynthia, and thank you for being part of us tonight.
Good evening, Vanessa, and equally good evening to all of you out there watching tonight.
Mange Venashus, it's a pleasure having you for this edition again.
My pleasure too, Vanessa, and good evening to our viewers.
Let us have a transition and we will be right back for the first part of the show. We go right away to take our first question for today. Following what is happening with media practitioners in Cameroon, is there any freedom of speech in this country? Cynthia? Yes or no? No.
There isn't.
There isn't. Mange Venashus?
Yes, Vanessa, there is.
There is. Question 2. Is the government serious in the way she is handling the COVID-19 fight in Cameroon concerning the involvement of private sector in the treatment of the virus? Cynthia?
Yeah, I think it is.
Mange Venashus, is the government serious?
No, Vanessa.
No. Question 3, and it is the last one. 1 week into school resumption, is the intensity of fighting the virus still serious as it started? Cynthia?
That is a no.
A no. Mange Venashus?
I share the same view. No.
No. All right. Stay tuned. Coming up next is the debate. Welcome back once more. In our first question, we're asking whether following what happened with media practitioners in Cameroon, is there any freedom of speech in this country? Cynthia, I begin with you. You said no, but then just looking at what happened, is it 2 days back, talking about the death of Samuel Wazizi. He was one of the media practitioners in the Southwest region who was arrested he was suspected of suspecting the separatist fighter in the Northwest region. We are talking very well suspected, not proven guilty, and today we learned that he is dead, and we are asking whether is there really a press freedom in Cameroon, and you don't think so?
Yeah. For that reason, I think there is really no such thing as press freedom in Cameroon. Well, I would not say press freedom is completely absent. Of course, there is to an extent some press freedom, but looking at it from the larger perspective, that is to say the percentage, if we have to grade it, I would say to the greater extent, there really isn't much of press freedom in Cameroon. That is just one example and one other case that has come to remind us of the current situation, because over and over we see journalists who are being persecuted, probably because of something they said or they had said something earlier, and that's with the least opportunity something happens and they get arrested, tortured and killed, like the case with Samuel Wazizi. And this morning we got a newspaper that told us that he actually was dead. He was killed right in August 2019, but it's only this week that we got to hear about his death. And that is something that is really terrible. And also the fact that the information was not disclosed, it wasn't made public at all. It is only now that we got to hear about the death. And I would also add that Samuel Wazizi is not the only one. If we have to go naming journalists in Cameroon that have been arrested, tortured, and some of them are still behind bars, either died of sickness or of the poor living conditions that they were having in prison. There are just so many of them, and it is often because of something they said, and most of the time it is because they said something against the government, something that our government officials did not concord with. So to a great extent there really is,
as long as it doesn't favor them.
Yeah, and just recently we witnessed a more recent one with our Minister of Territorial Administration, who threatened so many media organs in Cameroon. I would not even name them, but he threatens them because they disclosed information concerning the Ngabu massacre and other really inhuman things going on in Cameroon, and it turned out that they were right actually. But just because they spoke the truth, they said what they knew, they were threatened, and who knows, the threat could have gone way above just closing or shutting down their media organs. It could have even extended to their lives. So I think we're in a nation where it is said that well, let's say to an extent somebody can say there is freedom of speech, but as another person said, in Cameroon, freedom of speech is there, but freedom after speech is not guaranteed. And that is what we are going through.
And that is what we're going through. Then you just mentioned of a government dictatorship towards the press itself, but I begin to ask myself, is it only the government that is limiting the journalists to exercise their functions? What of public personalities who have influence in the way you treat your information, they threaten you? Society itself.
That thing spreads. I would say, let's say, for instance, if we had a government that really allowed the media to be transparent and to do their job normally, do you think that the rich people and all those who call themselves tycoons and all the like, do you think they would have the go-ahead to threaten media organs and journalists just because they say or publish something that doesn't favor them? So I think, like, the government shows an example that the other people, they take it up. And that is really, I don't know how we are really going to go about it, because we have gotten to a point where it's like journalism is a crime. And following Samuel Wazizi's death and social media campaigns, you see everywhere journalism is not a crime. And it really is not a crime. So asking about whether it is only government officials that do the bullying on media organs, it is not only government officials, but I would say they are the ones who really spearhead this. They are the ones who are at the forefront of media bullying. Let me call it that way.
Thank you very much, Cynthia Ngwemo. Mange Venashus, and I'll turn to you. We all know that the media is like the fourth power in the society. It reports government activities, it reports society activities, it is there to inform, educate the masses. But then in the exercise of their duties, they are being threatened, they are being killed, they are being harassed, they are being embarrassed. And you are rather saying that the press is freedom in Cameroon. How free it is when journalists have to go all through these obstacles and challenges to carry out their duty properly.
Vanessa, it is this word freedom that I think we in the media that we tend to misinterpret and misapply. When we talk of freedom, they simply tell us that your freedom begins from where mine ends. Where my freedom ends, it is where yours begins. Freedom does not mean that I say what I want. Freedom does not mean that I say what I want to whoever I want and how I want. That will no longer be freedom. That is being licentious. I think that we are substituting license for freedom in this profession. When we tend to think that because we have access to the microphone, we just say anything, it is dangerous. Remember, when you look at the genocide in Rwanda, the immediate cause of that genocide came from Radio Mekolin, because somebody flamed, the hatred between the Hutus and the Tutsis, and
but
it brought.
Not coming from a journalist, not coming from a media practitioner.
Well, that is still to be verified.
But the means they used in propagating actually the genocide.
What I mean here is the tool that we have in our hand, the microphone. Remember the the theory that we use in journalism, the theory or the mass media theory. We have access to millions of viewers and listeners that we don't even know them. And what you say that goes out, you cannot bring it back. You don't know the influence of what you are creating. I think, for example, you happen to be in school, they tell us that there is the truth, but there are some truths that you don't have access or you don't have the right to publish. It is a fact. It is a fact that you know. I think, for example, you are in Switzerland. For example, you are in Switzerland and the president dies there. You don't just take your telephone and you ring back your editor-in-chief and you pass online and say, Mr. Editor-in-chief, the president just died now in France. You are wrong. That's the fact, but you are not the right person to give that information. That is why in school they tell us of censorship in every information that we give. The information can be right, but then you have find out, am I the right person to give out this information? Another thing is, in reporting, we forget and take our personal, our personal emotions, our personal beliefs.
We become sensational.
Sensational. That's when we talk of sensational journalism, and we apply it when we are carrying out our duty, and that is why they talk of ethics and the deontology of this profession, so that we should scare off all these things.
Mangabena shows you are going broad. Let us sum it down, or let us brief it to the case of Samuel Wazizi.
Correct.
And so many other cases around the world.
That is where I was coming down to say that in the course of exercising our duty, we are bound by certain rules that limit us from carrying out certain things. If we take the example of Wazizi, what the government gave was that he is being suspected of liaising with separatist fighters. We say suspected. We don't know what happened. It's not like saying that we are supporting what happened to him, but then what happened to him should instead be a lesson to us still in the profession, to us still alive, that if we don't put into practice our journalistic professional ethics and deontology, we may walk the same path. Because when we talk of freedom of the press in Cameroon, Vanessa, I think Cameroon is one of those countries that you speak freely. She said something that freedom of speech is there, but freedom after the speech may not be there. In some countries, you are not allowed to even criticize the president. Criticize the president and you see what happens to you.
Venasius, permit me to, you have said a lot of things that caught my interest. And the one that mostly appealed to me was the one where you said we have a very powerful tool. And that is the truth. With these microphones we have and the cameras, we can say things that influence life in so many ways. But I would want you to understand that if you want to look at the greatest media platforms where information is distorted and the wrong things are said, it is social media platforms. But for we, the journalists, the trained and the professional journalists, I think that to an extent we are conscious of certain things that are very fragile or sensitive, some sensitive issues. Even when we go into criticizing our government officials, I think we are conscious of words, terms, and certain sorts of information. So let's begin by saying that I want to believe that in Cameroon, to an extent, we media practitioners, I think we are professional to an extent, and most of the times the informations that we disclose that displease certain people are not necessarily false informations. Sometimes it's just that they would have preferred that it remains disclosed and it stays behind doors and not be given out to the public. But just like you said, in other countries you cannot even insult the president and all the like. Yes, I agree with that, but here it doesn't mean that when you insult the president you go scot-free. Some do, but others don't. And besides, I followed a report this morning that classified Cameroon as number 130 something. When they talk about the countries with media freedom in Cameroon, they said in the past 2 years Cameroon lost 2 places, becoming, out of 138, Cameroon was, I think, 134 or something, if I'm not mistaken. So that means that we are not the only people seeing the injustice and the maltreatment that media organs in Cameroon and journalists go through in Cameroon. It is something that is very clear and evident, and we cannot say it is not happening.
Yes, Cynthia, to come back to what you were saying, you are right. But then my point here is we have the freedom to talk, but speak in relation to... We are not trying to condone the fact that we should hide facts. There are facts that you may have them, but you are not the right person to give those facts. There are facts that that's why we suffer more when you want to book for audience, perhaps from some government officials. They don't reveal facts to you, because once you're in possession of those facts, we mishandle them. We mishandle them, not because they are not facts, but because that was not the right way we should give. What I was saying here is, we have the freedom to speak. I
think you should be concluding with your point in the first place.
Yes, we have the freedom to speak, but that freedom should be, when we define freedom is doing the right thing, doing what is supposed to be done. Freedom is operating within the ambit of the law. If you carry out the law in our context here, would be the norms, the ethics of our profession. When you operate within the ethics of your profession, there are some words that they tell you in school that these words are not professionally upright. Not that you don't know how to use it, not that they are not fitting in this place, but then professionally speaking, as a professional, you should not use it. That is why there is a distinction between a professional journalist who is practicing in a conventional media platform like we are, and then these other artificial media practitioners on social media. That is why on social media, you hear of any type of thing, abuses, anything. But in a conventional media house, it is not. That's why we have the freedom, but that freedom should be within the ambit of the law, and the law here within the ambit of our norms and the ethics.
Thank you very much also, Mange Venatius, for your viewpoint, but not forgetting that it is the truth is good, but not all truth is meant to be told. Cynthia, I would turn back to you. You are accepting the fact that government is serious in the way she is handling the fight against the coronavirus in Cameroon, especially concerning the private sector.
Yes, I agree with that. It's true that the fight against coronavirus in Cameroon is having a lot of ups and downs, and there are certain things we want to have that we are not having. But I think to a great extent, the government is involving the private sector when it comes to treatment of coronavirus in Cameroon. And I think that is a very big step ahead, because you hear about private hospitals and private health institutions that are being involved in the treatment of
Cynthia,
coronavirus.
I think it's of recent that information came out that they are trying to actually sideline some private hospitals that could handle coronavirus cases.
Exactly. Now, I'm sure many of you would agree with me that there are many private institutions, private hospitals in Cameroon that have very huge capabilities, that have huge capacities to be able to handle not only coronavirus but many other diseases, even more than some government institutions. And just like you were saying, the government had already, let's say, traced out some of these hospitals that are authorized to handle coronavirus cases. And even now, the list is still increasing. And I think it is a good step. So in that particular way, in that particular aspect, I believe that the government is really making efforts, because the government could have as well said that no, we are the only ones to handle it, like we are the government of Cameroon and we should be the only ones to take care of it. And I'll even say that recently we heard about the Marie-O polyclinic that got sanctioned because they were taking charge of coronavirus cases but without government authorization. And that is just a thing, like Mange Venatius was saying earlier on, that we have the freedom to do things, but there are rules and regulations, there are laws that we have to respect. And that is the case. If you have not received government authorization to take charge of coronavirus cases, then don't do it. But if you do, then go ahead. And in that way, the government is involving the private sector. So for me, it's an applause.
It's an applause to the government. Mange Venatius, you rather think that the government is not involving the private sector in this fight, in the treatment of COVID-19?
Not involving, but not being serious. Being serious from the onset. Vanessa, we are talking about reaching 6,000 cases of confirmed cases before the government is thinking of bringing in the private sector. Cynthia has actually said something there, that most private hospitals in Cameroon
are well equipped
with very dedicated medical staff. Perhaps I may risk saying more than what we have in government hospitals.
Yeah.
More than what we have in government
during
hospitals.
the Marie-O incident, we heard that they even had ventilators.
More than what the government had.
Yeah.
The problem here is the government minimized the fight of the pandemic. And because you cannot explain why we are facing a common enemy, which is the virus, and an individual decides to launch into handling the patients, and then the government steps forward and closed the health center or the facility. We heard patients were displaced, and in the course of that displacement, one died. Now the problem here is the government would have from the beginning realized that we are not able to handle this virus alone. That is what happened with education. When you look at the educational landscape that we have in Cameroon, the private education dominates. When you look at performance, government school comes around the 6th, the 7th, if at all, they even reach there. Most schools that performed well, they are private schools. It's the same thing with health facilities. That is why government can have the material. Government may have qualified doctors, but when you look at patient-doctor relationship, it is lacking in most hospitals. And that is why you would hear that people prefer going to private hospitals than to government hospitals. Because there's a problem with, I want to say, follow-up. You know, they neglect this government thing and nobody takes care of it. So they would have called in the help from the private sector from the onset. we might not have been where we are. But since the government decided to take it alone, how many months into? This thing started in March, when they started becoming serious in Cameroon. We already in June, before the Prime Minister is thinking of involving the private sector. So to me, I said they were not that serious in the fight because they minimized it. And that brought us to where we are. I think it's high time that somebody said this coronavirus has challenged all medical or all health sectors in all countries. And not only health sectors, I think we should take the example from the coronavirus pandemic and apply it in other sectors. If there's any economy, any government, any country that wants to advance, the government has never done it alone. In some economies, most economies, people don't even get into the public service because in the public service you have a structurized ladder that you have to go. But in the private sector, I debate my salary with my employer.
And there, Venasius, I'm very much d'accord with you because in most public or government institutions, we have this what we call laissez-faire. Like the staff, they do what they want, they come at any time that they want, and they do whatever they want to do. But in private sectors, it is way more strict than that. So they have certain rules that they must work with it, and this leads them to be more performant and most of the times more than some of the government hospitals. And we must also say that the fight against COVID-19 is not only in hospitals. We have like the Samuel Cleders and some other local medicines that local Cameroonians are coming up with that the government is also not, it doesn't really shut out completely.
That is
and that is also something to really appreciate the government for, because in some countries they believe that it is only the hospital that can handle it. But if we decide to trust private institutions as well as our local locally made medicines, then I think that's a big step ahead. And from the onset, they were slow when it came to that. It's true that from the onset, the government thought maybe they could handle it all alone. But better late than never. They got to realize that it's not the case, and now the private hospitals and others are also involved.
Better late than never, Cynthia, was to come to this point of this private sector traditional medicines that are being used. You understand that when Monsignor Cleda came out with his treatment, there are 3 Catholic hospitals that are being used in Douala here. One in Bonabiri, one in Nilong, and one in Pekadus or Pekade, something like that. Now, the problem is, only in Catholic hospitals they are using it. If the government wanted to bring in the private sector, why not also start bringing patients to test in it, or take the treatment from Monsignor?
Market Venasius only in Catholic hospitals, but then it's open for the public.
That's exactly
it is open for the public. It is open for the public, but the government is silent on it. That's my problem.
I am sure you are aware that the government knows what is going on, and the government has the capability to put a stop to it. If the government was against, the government could have stopped it. But the fact that the government allows, it gives that possibility for
people to go there and for them to consult.
Yes,
which means gentlemen, let us take our third question for today. All right. 1 week into school resumption, is the intensity of fighting the virus still serious as it started? Cynthia, you don't think that it was serious?
No,
school it resumed on June 1st. Activities like preparing the children, the school itself, the staff, it was very strong
from the onset.
But now you feel that it has been relaxed just
from
barely 1 week.
From my observations, right? It's true that maybe I'm not a student, neither am I a teacher, that I'm not in the classrooms, but from my observations and from reports, and even from the way I see students out there, I think those safety measures have really been relented to an extent. Because look at the schools, how many students, again, from the first day of school, many of the students had their face mask on, and they were really so conscious about washing of hands and all the like, social distancing. But right now, how many of them, you see them coming back from school, they are walking and discussing no face mask and nothing of that sort. So I don't know if it is the school that fails to protect them, or to really give them that consciousness that they don't have to give up on the safety measures. But that is what I have observed. And I saw a picture today, a classroom in the southwest region, actually, in a classroom where students were still sitting 2 per bench. 2 per bench. Can you imagine? Where is the social distancing in that? And unlike the first day of school, where you see 1 per bench, some will even skip a desk before.
15,
but I realized that in that case, they are already sitting 2 per bench, especially with the fact that just recently, I think 2 days ago, that was yesterday actually, where the other classes of Form 5 and Premier and the others were authorized to go back to school. So I think that has maybe reduced the space that they had, and so they find themselves forced to start giving up on security measures. So I think they need to step up again.
They need to step up again. Manga Venashus, you are supporting Cynthia's point of view tonight. Maybe because inspections have also reduced, or maybe because some of the classes have resumed school so this Thursday.
Vanessa, I always insist on this point of lack of follow-up. Before resumption of 1st June, there has been this conscientization going on to make sure that we raise awareness on the learners as well as the school authorities, the necessity for respecting these barrier measures. But from every indication, what we have is like, familiarity breeds contempt. And then now, since we have been in school for practically 3-4 days, it's like the virus is no longer there. It is still the same attitude that we adults, we Cameroonians adopted when this virus started. The fear that we had with the virus is no longer there. In school, you still find children now, they're holding hands, discussing normally, without even face masks, like Cynthia is saying.
Yes.
And then we were asking, is it what is happening outside or in class? Is it the same thing? Because if that's the same thing in class, we may be heading for very tough periods in the next 2-3 weeks to come. Because if we forget to limit the rate of contamination in school, then we would have been proving those who were clamoring for school resumption, would have been proving them right. Because there are some people they were of the opinion that we should not resume.
And Manga, from our observation, I discovered that the little ones even do respect these measures more than the adults.
Of course, when you are still little, when they tell you don't do this, you are afraid. But when you are a big man, they tell you, what do you want to tell me? Because you will not tell me how an adult refuses to put on to wear his or her face mask, and then you see little children. The problem here is we have this negligence. Some of us are not yet convinced at all of the virus, and that is why we still find it difficult. I know it is not that easy to continue putting on the face mask, but then my problem should be, we would have been on this issue of sensitization. Let us keep drumming the message into the ears of these children, as we are saying now, that respect the barrier measures. It is for your life as an individual first.
As an individual.
Yes. Don't allow your classmate to contaminate you because you are already in school. Vanessa, when they were talking of school resumption, one condition which I said I would see, and just barely 3 days, it did not hold, was no child you cannot bake a pen. No child will, you come to class, you sit on the same bench, you will use the bench throughout these 2 months, you come and sit, there's no break, you leave the bench and straight you go back to the house. You don't share anything in school, you don't eat in school, you don't buy food in school, no water. But the question we are asking is, what capacity do we have to maintain this throughout this period? That's why
So what are you recommending now, the teachers, the students?
I keep recommending to parents, to the educational community, that we should not, relax. We should not, give way to this laziness that is creeping in. We should continue to let our learners, our children, to understand that we need to respect the barrier measures. Don't give in to the temptation of your classmates because he wants to sit with you, because he wants to take your pen, he wants to take your book. Don't accept. Don't remove your face mask because you think that no, continue wearing it in as much as you are outside of your house, in as much as you are in school, keep wearing it. And in that way, we may be able to reduce the rate of contamination, because from statistics, contamination keeps increasing. We are not yet doing anything, which means the barrier measures, we are not respecting them at all.
Thank you very much, Mange Venashus, for being there tonight.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Probably wish you a happy weekend.
And same to you, to our viewers.
Cynthia, your recommendation?
Talking about recommendations, I'll go in the same line with Mange Venashus, because we really need to keep up with sensitization. It is not because we did sensitization 1 or 2 weeks ago and we understood that we have to stop, because we human beings are like, I don't know where we hear it enters here and goes out the other way, especially when we are dealing with children and adolescents. So I think in the school milieus, as well as in every other place where people gather, the sensitization needs to go on. Every morning they need to talk to the children that you must wash your hands, you must do this, put on your face mask, don't share things, don't sit together. As well as at home, parents and we, the elderly ones too, we should try to keep sensitizing our children.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for your viewpoints tonight.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure also having you. But then, in as much as the government, the teachers, the parents are carrying out an effort, you the pupils, you the students, try as well as to respect these barrier measures. Until we meet again, it has been our pleasure having you for this weekend. Do have a blessed Friday and see you again on Monday.